Today I'm joined by James Yucel, the founder of Defund the BBC and Refunders Now. James, thank you for joining me.
No worries, no worries.
So I'd like to start by discussing the student-led campaign Refunders Now, which you founded in June and I believe recently left. So for those who've not heard of it, what is Refunders Now and what does the campaign seek to achieve?
So I started it in September with a few friends, basically, out of frustration, out of the abysmal way students have been treated by their universities and devolved governments in light of the coronavirus pandemic and how it had been generally handled.
Cool. So clearly there are huge discrepancies between the ways in which the universities are teaching students. There are universities like Oxford and Cambridge who have kind of a fairly balanced approach between small group in-person teaching with tutorials or seminars and then lectures online with Zoom. And then there are others, countless others that have gone fully digital. By seeking to refund the students, does it not come, is there not a problem with these discrepancies? Is a more balanced approach needed?
In what sense? Could you expand on that?
Yeah, so in the sense that for people like me at Oxford, we have in-person teaching, whereas I know the campaign focuses a lot on universities where it's mostly online. If we were to refund students, would a more balanced approach be needed?
Well, I think personally, I've got to disclose the fact that I'm no longer part of Refund Us Now, so I can't speak on behalf of the campaign. What I will say is we've obviously got to take into account everyone's situation because, for instance, international students are in a lot worse position at the moment because they've spent thousands of pounds to get over to their universities in the UK under the assumption they were going to get a blended learning experience, and the second they got there, it was told that they would be online, and now they're thousands of pounds out of pocket. So definitely understand the cause for a more balanced approach to the situation.
Yeah. And I think we can both agree that it's not the fault of the universities that the COVID pandemic has happened and it's been as bad as it is. And certainly not their fault that there's been such sharp rises in cases across the country, including among university students. For poorer universities, the coronavirus has brought significant financial difficulties and some risk closing completely because of it. With this in mind, do you seriously think it's wise to start refunding students?
Yeah, I personally do, because I feel like we've really have been, I mean, don't get me wrong, like in these past few years, I've, as a student, witnessed student-led campaigns completely flop and really give off a bad image of students towards not even the general public, but to our public servants as well. Some would say we're entitled and et cetera, but I think that the reality we've got to grapple with right now is that we've been treated extremely poorly in this situation, and I think that there's definitely been the option at every university for us to have stayed home and done our course online, which would have saved us a lot of money.
Yeah, and you've actually just touched a bit on my next question, which was going to be, considering the recent rise in cases and the number of local lockdowns, do you think it is better for students, universities and families if the students were just to be sent home and being able to study in their family environment?
I think students should most certainly have the choice. Yeah.
So I'd like to move on to the other campaign that you've founded, Defund the BBC. I believe you've also recently left this. So why did you start the campaign? Why do you believe that the BBC should be defunded? And what does this mean in practice?
Well, I personally started it, out of frustration, like this wasn't an AstroTurf campaign funded by the likes of think tanks on Tufton Street. This was really just me in my room with a laptop. And yeah, it came as obviously quite a shock. And I think I started it majorly out of frustration with the way the BBC were holding themselves. And I think since the campaign has started, a lot of people have began to kind of realize that this isn't a small campaign. This is a movement that a lot of people really care about. I think, going forward, it's now in the safe hands of experienced campaigners, not, 19-year-olds in their bedrooms. I think, certainly we've got a good shot at completing the aims of decriminalising non-payment of the licence fee and reducing the Real Charter to only cover BBC content, which are the two key aims of the campaign are currently championing.
Sure. I know the campaign itself certainly recently, and I know you did say you left towards the end of September, but it has recently taken a turn to kind of target the content on the BBC, saying that it's kind of not reaching out to the full demographic of the UK. But the BBC does year after year broadcast some of the most viewed TV shows. In 2019, for example, Gavin and Stacey Christmas special had almost 18 million views. It was by far the most popular TV show. So how can you say really that the BBC has failed to produce the content the nation wants when its viewership is just so high?
Well, I think it's interesting you mentioned Gavin and Stacey as your example, which was a show that was obviously popular in 2005 and 2006, which is an era most people want the BBC to return to. Whereas right now we're seeing a lot of their new content, not a lot of people enjoy them. And I think personally, don't get me wrong, like Luther, Whitechapel, some of my favorite shows here. But I think really that the BBC, from my personal point of view, needs to grasp with the fact that aiming to please a certain substrata of society, the middle class students, from Paddington, is not the best direction to go, because by doing that you're ignoring its primary viewership, which are primarily old-aged citizens scattered across the country, not just 23-year-old Ruperts living in Chelsea.
Sure. I think we can both agree though that it is impossible for any one organisation to cater to the needs of absolutely everyone.
Sure.
But surely they've got 10 TV services, 10 national radio stations, a remarkable amount of content available on both the BBC iPlayer and BBC Sound. So surely the BBC gets as close as anyone will.
I mean, sure, I completely get that point of view. I think that the key thing to remember is that you don't need to pay the license fee to watch the BBC. You need a license fee to watch all live television. So they've got a really mafia-like hold on the television industry, one would say. And, by obviously a big appeal of the BBC is the fact that they don't play adverts.
Mm-hmm.
And but I think this is kind of the root of the problem, in the sense that if the BBC is so confident, and those are the representatives of the BBC are so confident that their content is good, then I'm sure they'd be able to produce it on a commercial level.
Yeah. The campaign's also taken aim at people such as Gary Lineker, who have tweeted their personal views at the aim that this isn't kind of the impartiality that the BBC is supposed to deliver. Now, people like Mr. Lineker, Mr. Lineker himself, for example, he's a football pundit, an ex-professional footballer. He's paid by the BBC to deliver analysis on football, present TV shows on football. He's not a journalist. He's not the BBC's political correspondent, definitely. So why does it matter if people like him share their own opinions on Twitter? Surely limiting...
Because they're funded by the license fee. That's the key thing. They're funded by this compulsory fee in order to watch live television. They've got this grip on the television industry. Yeah. And I feel like if it was able to stand up in an old commercial sense, they could pay Gary Lineker what they want, just not at the expense of, the everyday taxpayer.
Sure. I want to move on to the group itself, Defund the BBC, because it has on a number of occasions claimed to be kind of free from any political bias, and it's kind of gone out of its way to try and prove that. But yet it has retweeted Leave.eu, Conservative Home. It's tweeted anti-Black Lives Matter sentiments, retweeted Police Lives Matter posts. It's called Nicola Sturgeon's COVID briefings, party political broadcasts, and even the Daily Mail and The Sun have called the campaign out as being right-wing groups funded by Brexiteers. Does the campaign really care about impartiality, or does it just want a right-wing BBC?
It's an interesting question. I mean, obviously, not to mention that, I mean, it's difficult to answer. I think a key thing to remember is not just like, while we're obviously, I mean, we've got the public endorsement of Kate Hoey, for instance, who's an ex-Labour MP, and there are several former Labour MPs who have spoken out about the BBC cutting things like local funding. So I think it really depends on what kind of criticism you're using against the BBC. But at the same time, I mean, this is an extraordinarily cynical view to take, because I think the key thing to remember here is, whilst obviously campaigns should be acting on the moral high ground to kind of achieve their aims, that campaigning isn't it's not as easy as it looks, in that sense. And I just really think that really depends on the criticism of the BBC, because a lot of Labour MPs have obviously spoken out and get local cuts, as have Tory MPs. And I think that to appeal to the left of the argument, for instance, I think Darren Grimes, who of course is a Conservative commentator, made the very good point that the license fee, at least the criminalisation aspect of it, targets working class single mothers the most. And I think it's important to say that this is not a progressive fee at all. This is a flat fee where everyone is charged the same money. You've got single mothers living in Blackpool with kids to feed, paying the exact same money as, say, an investment banker in Chelsea. It doesn't seem very fair to me in that sense. So in terms of, the left's strive for equality, certainly I think that's where arguments like that come in.
Sure. I'm just wondering whether this campaign would have even started if the BBC hadn't scrapped its free TV licenses for pensioners.
Well, I think obviously that's a big aspect of it. I mean, for me, I started it around their reporting to Black Lives Matter movement, but I think obviously that was evidently the key time to start such a campaign, because there was a lot of public outrage about the BBC. But I think it's just important to consider that there are countless criticisms one can make about the BBC, and once you've got this entity where all anyone can do is criticize it, except for those who are actually employed by it, you've got a problem.
And moving on to yourself, obviously you have started two quite successful campaigns. For students watching who are politically minded, who perhaps have their own campaigns they've been dreaming up, how do you start a successful political campaign?
Right. Bit of a loaded question. Okay, well, I obviously don't want to speak about this in such a cynical sense, but, campaigning is that way. I think, I mean, what I did was personally, Defund the BBC was trending, and I think it was a play on, most people would say it was a play on words to the Americanism, which is defund the police, which is what a lot of people were thinking. And obviously it was trending that night, and I checked to see if the handle was there. So I think it's obviously a key handle. I think a lot of people really delve too much into, I think people overthink it a lot, when the reality is you just need something short, sweet, simple, rememberable, and go from there, really. I think it's just a key of, tapping into the right public mood. And a lot of people, of course, like you said, there might be students out there thinking of starting their own campaign. But I think it's important to consider that what you believe in isn't what hundreds and thousands of others believe in. Like, I've got views that many of Defund the BBC supporters would not support. That's just my opinion. And those kind of campaigns wouldn't really get off the ground. But I think I was very happy to have started a campaign, something I deeply believe in, which is that the BBC should stand on its own in a commercial basis.
Yeah, that's brilliant. I was just wondering why you did leave those two campaigns so recently.
Sorry, could you repeat that?
I was just wondering why you left both campaigns recently.
Yeah, I think it's, there's a lot of uncertainty going on with my studies at the moment, being in Glasgow. And I think there are just, I mean, obviously the uncertainty is there, and I left Defund the BBC, which was obviously a difficult decision to make, and Refund Us Now as well, under the knowledge that they were in safe hands, experienced campaigners. So ultimately, I've got no doubt they will be successful, both of them. But I think just for me at the stage right now, it just wasn't right for me to continue It's too much on my plate.
And do you have any plans to start any more political campaigns?
Probably not. I need a rest. I'm not going to lie. Just need a bit of a rest.
Yeah. Well, that's brilliant. Thank you so much, James, for joining me.
Sure. Brilliant.
Thanks.